If somebody wants to share, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to share real quickly, please.
Hi. So I bought my first home in St. Louis back in June, and that one took me 3 months to fill, but it filled. So I'm getting my first payment this month. And in the meantime, I bought two more houses in Peoria, Illinois. And I bought one last week and one on Monday, and they both just sold to an investor, and I signed right before this meeting. So I got three sold houses, and I can't believe it.
Congratulations. That is
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, I'm so excited. I saw people in the group doing it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go slower than that. And it just happened all so quickly. So that's really exciting.
So there's two, you get these boosts. The first is when you buy, you get a little boost. I bought the property, we closed it. But the second boost, which I think is more exciting, is when you fill it,
Yeah.
right? Because now it's a producing asset. It's a big deal. So I saw your question about Peoria, but yeah, no, you're fine as long as you got them filled. That's great.
Absolutely.
Anybody else has something to share before we go on to the presentation? No? Okay. Well, I hope we'll have more and more of these going forward. And I want to make sure that everybody can see my screen. Today, we are going to talk about the top 10 closing checklist. So most of these things are obvious and easy and straightforward and simple, but I have put in stuff in there that I've learned from experience. And you might already know that I have quite a bit of experience in real estate. I've been doing this for a while, but I tell you, I'm also learning every day because I've never bought virtually, right? So I'm buying in these markets where I've never bought before. I've only bought properties in Texas. I am in Texas. So these are some of the things that I'm going to talk about. Some of those things may differ slightly based on which state you're buying in, which county you're in, but generally it's the same. All right. So top 10 closing checklists. Number one, choosing your title company, which is obvious, right? So in some states, like Illinois, the seller will choose the title company. And one of the reasons why they get to choose a title company is, well, guess what? They're paying most of the closing costs. So obviously they want to know who they're going to be with. So one of the reasons why, like I said, they want to choose their title company is because they're paying the costs, right? They're paying most of the closing costs. Now, in some other states or other situation, if you have to choose the title company, be very careful because remember, you are going to pay some of these costs, and you want to know that number one, just like all professions, they are bad title companies. And I've had some recent experience with title companies that I was extremely shocked that they are so unprofessional, especially around money. And it's shocking. So please, if you're in a situation where you have to choose a title company, choose one of the three options. So number one, and it has worked. I've done this many times and it has always worked really well. If you're working with a licensed real estate agent, ask them, where have you been closing your deals, and get some feedback from them, especially if they're experienced, if they've been in real estate business for more than 5 years, and if they've closed a lot of deals, they can actually give you a really good referral and give you some feedback. So that is one you can use safely. Number two, if the buyer through who you're buying the property, especially if you're buying on our Freedom Accelerator forum, uh, they may tell you that they've used certain title company and they have good experience with them, and you can use them. Um, and finally, you can just post on the forum, and you'll get some feedback from people on the forum, which city you are in and where you're buying. All right. So that's that. Now, here's a tip. In some states, you can also close your transaction at an attorney's office. So I've closed. I think it was in Decatur where I used an attorney. It was really funny that this attorney, his website was from like 19, I don't know, 87 or 88. There was one phone number, and I mean, it was really, really sketchy. but who I was working with, the seller, he's on the forum, and he assured me, no, he's worked with him, he's good. So, all right. So that's number one. Number two, contact information. Now, this is very obvious, I know, but I'm telling you, this is one of the very important part, and I'll tell you why. Number one, as soon as you have the property under contract, the first, especially if you're buying from a wholesaler, if you're or any person who is the contact person that you're buying from, you want the actual physical address of the title company. You want their phone number, the main line. You want their email address and website address. So that's the bare minimum you need for the title company, right? Also, this is the most important thing. You want the direct phone number and direct email, preferably of the escrow officer or the closing agent. Because if you don't, then if something comes up at the last moment, the only person who can answer your question about the closing is going to be the escrow officer. Anybody else, the front desk, the managers, or whatever, there's a whole bunch of people who work, they cannot answer their question. They don't even know what it is. They'll go by the file number, but they won't know anything. All right. And then ensure that the escrow officer or the closing agent is aware that you are the buyer. So they actually have that information. If you're buying from a wholesaler, if it's an assignment, remember, if you just reach out to them, they won't acknowledge you. So your contact person, whoever is assigned the deal to you, or you're buying from a wholesaler, they have to be the one to do the intro for you. And it has to be done very, very quickly, right at the beginning, because there'll be a lot of communication that's going to go on between you and the title company. And if you don't know them, then it's going to become harder and harder. All right. Now, let me give you a tip. This has happened with me, and so that's why I'm telling you. Do not assume that you know the name of the title company, that, oh, no worries, I'll just Google them maybe a week before and I'll figure it out. I forgot the name of the title company, but I forgot it was in either Decatur or one of these cities. No, a larger. It was in Peoria. And apparently that title company, there was another title company with a slightly variation name, and the addresses were all over the place. So I actually had to go through a lot of trouble to find the right title company because I couldn't get the information directly from the seller at that point. So I'm just saying that be very careful, because guess what? Let's say you are wiring funds, and if a little miscommunication happens and you wire the funds without knowing where the money is supposed to go, because especially when you're wiring the funds, one of the things that we verify is, what is the name of the title company, where is their bank account, and then usually when, especially if you're sending cash, you want to know where the bank is, what is the actual physical address of the bank, because remember, once the wire is gone, it's gone, right? So this is very important. Make sure you have the right title company, you have the correct information. All right. Next, closing date. Very, very obvious that you want to make sure that, hey, as soon as you know the closing date. Now, what happens is, this is like one of those things that it's like a moving post that the seller or the title company will say, oh yeah, we are closing next week. um, I've dealt with some very, very good title companies, and they're very professional. They have everything streamlined, and sure enough, things happen. But equally, I work with very unprofessional title companies who either don't know what they're doing, they got too much on their plate, and every week there's a new story, right? So here are a couple of things to be aware of. Number one, to ensure that the closing can happen, a title company has to do these following things successfully. Number one, they have to do a title search, right? Which means they have to ensure that the current owner, sure enough, owns the property outright, and they have the right to sell the property to you, right? They also have to check if there are any outstanding liens on the property. That could be taxes, it could be mechanical liens. In some cases, some of these liens are paid at the closing by the seller. That's nothing, that's very common, it happens all the time, but that's their job, that's why they're doing this, right? They also have to calculate basically uh, who's going to get who's going to get paid what from the funding after the liens are paid off, and the disbursements. Now, this is very important because this has come up so many times on our forum. This is a good time to schedule your final walkthrough once your closing date is determined, right? Because if you wait or you close and now you heard about, where somebody posted that their home was broken into, I think within 24 hours after they closed, and everything was ripped off, right? I mean, it can still happen afterwards, but what I am suggesting and what people are saying, and I've done that. I've not done that all the time. I think I need to get better at that. But it's a great idea to write as soon as you know for sure that this is the closing date, schedule 24 hours before. In fact, when I have agents involved, I actually tell them right up front, hey, I want to make sure I do a 24 hours prior to closing walkthrough, and it has to be scheduled. If you do not do the walkthrough, I will have to push the closing. I just tell them up front, I'm not going to close on this date unless we do the walkthrough. And of course, the agents are. It's important for them because they won't get paid if the closing doesn't happen, and they're more than happy to do the walkthrough for you. And remember that walkthrough that you don't have to have your boots on the ground do it. Even if the agent does, you just want to make sure the home's still there. You want to make sure the electric and everything is still there. So your agent can do that as well. All right. Tip, this is very important. Never assume that your closing is on a certain date unless the title company has issued a settlement statement. And I can tell you with my experience, is one of the property was delayed more than a month because they kept saying that, oh, the closing is on this day, the closing is on this day, and so on. And I knew that the closing was not happening. They were lying because every time they told me that, I asked them, okay, can I have the settlement statement? And I never received the settlement statement because settlement statement is the indication of the title company saying that we've done all the work, we are ready to close. So if they're not giving you the settlement statement, they haven't finalized everything. You see what I'm saying? So always ask for the settlement statement because that will also tell you if there are any errors or something that was supposed to be paid by the seller and they have it there, you can correct it. And so that's what we need to do. Step 3 would be the closing date. Legal documents. So if you're paying cash for the property, it's pretty straightforward. There's no any additional document that the title company needs from you. Uh, but if you have a private money lender, then you do need following documents drawn: a mortgage and a promissory note. We all know that it's in our system. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can do them yourself. You can literally create the documents yourself, and or you can have the title company or your attorney, whoever is involved in the closing process, do them for you. They will obviously charge you for it, but they will do them for you. Now, I've come across an interesting situation where when I ask the title company, they actually don't do this. As a practice, they don't do it. So what I started doing was I have mortgage and promissory notes for each state already prepared. I have a boilerplate kind of a template, and I just create them myself. And it's just easy for me because I work with private lenders and they're all over the place, and it's very important that the things get to them on time. So I do them myself. But just letting you know that some title companies may not do it, and it has happened more than once with me. So be prepared with that. Don't like go into it assuming that, oh, they'll do it, and at the last moment they say no, we don't do it. All right. Also important is when a private money lender is involved, the title company does not need the promissory note, right? You do need the promissory note for yourself and for your private money lender, but the title company has nothing to do with that. They have no interest in that. It has no uh, closing. There's no transactional need for that. Okay. What they need is a notarized copy of the mortgage. That's the only thing they need. All right. Next, funding process. So if you're paying cash for the property, the process is simple. You'll inform the escrow officer or the closing agent at the title company that the funds are going to be wired. They'll give you the wiring instructions, and then you're going to wire the funds. That's where I told you that you need to know the correct information of the title company, and you need to know the correct information the bank where the funds are going so that everything is done correctly. Now, if the money is coming from a private money lender, the process is a little bit uh, more challenging in the sense that not only will they send the wiring instructions directly to the private money lender, but since you're involved, you're making sure that the transaction happens. You have to take the lead, which means you have to make sure you have the wiring instructions, and then you send them over to your private money lender as well, so they have it. So there's no excuse for anybody to say, "Well, I didn't have the information, so I couldn't send in the money." Right? You don't want that. So that's that. Uh, and also, I've found that even though the process appears to be same and similar, when I talk to some title companies, I get kind of different answers. And you have two choices. You either say, no, this is not the way I do business, or this is not what I've done. It's going to delay everything. Or two, okay, I'll do it. Tell me what I need to do. Right. So what I'm saying is always be prepared for them to tell you, no, this is how we do it. Okay, and so just don't assume that, oh, I already figured it out, and suddenly they said, no, we don't do it that way, right? Okay, now this is the most important tip in this presentation. If you of any value, this is probably the most valuable tip. At some point, you're going to work with private money lenders. All right, this has happened to me at least twice. So I want to tell you with my experience, so you can learn from my experience. Never have your private money lender wire the funds over to the title company prior to receiving a satisfactory settlement statement and a confirmed closing date. Why do I say that? Because like I said, they keep telling you, oh, the closing is on this date. In fact, some of these escrow officers, they have the audacity to put pressure on you by saying, make sure the funds are available so we can close. And my question to them always is, well, I haven't seen the settlement statement. I can't have my private money lender send over the funds. So one time, at least once, I did this. The second time, I didn't do it. They were like, absolutely, oh no, don't worry about it. We are ready to close. Everything is ready. And I had my private money lender send over the funds. And sure enough, the closing was delayed more than two weeks or 2.5 weeks. So the funds sat in that account, in the escrow account for 2 weeks. Now, I don't know if what your experience is. My private money lender never said anything. I felt really bad, so I ended up paying an extra month of interest payment to my private money lender. But be aware, you want your private money lenders to be very happy with you. And obviously, they didn't have any reason for that. But it happens because the title companies, they don't really care. So it's on you to make sure that the funds only get wired usually on the day of the closing. That's the really the best thing. So you want to make sure you time it in such a way that you have the settlement statement, everything is clear. Usually wiring is rather simple if the private money lender is sending it from their account. If it's from a self-directed IRA, it's a little bit complicated. It could take up to 48 hours. So just be aware of that. All right. That's five. Number six, insurance coverage. So, insurance coverage, buying insurance policy does not have any impact on the closing process itself, right? However, whether you're using a private money lender, well, of course, in case of private money lender, you definitely need an insurance policy. I just say that either way, you need an insurance policy in effect on the day you close. So the last thing you want to do is you close on the property and the day after it burns down, right? So obviously nobody wants that. So it's really easy to get a code. We all know that. So you just have to instruct your broker to have the effective date of the policy to be to coincide with the closing date, because a lot of times you might get a code early, you might prepay for it, buy it, but you can actually make it effective certain date. So you're not paying the premium for the date leading up to the closing. And like I said, your closing could get stuck to a week or two, and so you shouldn't be paying for that. All right, and most importantly, if you have a private money lender, you need to provide your private money lender's information to your broker because they have to be listed as the mortgagee on the policy. That's one of the protection you're giving your private money lender. Tip: while we have an excellent referral system within our community, if you're not satisfied with the quote you're getting, always get 3 quotes, right? Title company charges. All right, so this is fun. So you don't really need to be an expert to scan through the settlement statement, and there's many times duplicate, frivolous charges. Um, I always ask question. I've even had a title company cut their charges down because of the delays they caused, and I told them I had to, in this case, in the case of the private money lender, where I had to pay extra interest. I forced them to reduce their charges, their title company charges. And initially, they all say the same thing. Oh, we cannot do that. So I found out who the owner was. I found out who the attorney was, who the attorney who ran that place, but his name was not there. I found out about him and I copied him in, and they were able to give me a refund on those. So make sure you check. In my case, I've found duplicate charges of they charge wire fee several times, and if you don't ask them, and they're not like $5, they're like $30 fees each time they charge you, right? So make sure you question everything. Tip: many title companies use boilerplate templates for closing, which means they add their standard charges and include it in the closing. So always check. Here's something that happened with me. So remember I told you that I prepare my own mortgage and promissory note. So, so in one of the closing, I saw my title company charging me for that, and I was like, okay. So I reached out to her, and because they were using boilerplate templates, she didn't even know. I had to tell her, this is something I prepared, right? So she had to think about. She said, oh yeah, we'll take care of it. So always check. All right, private money lender funding management. So if you have a private money lender, and it's very important that you get all the documentation, funding, borrowing process correct up front, so you have everything under control. It gets complicated very quickly if you are in a different location, the title company is in a different location, and the private money lender is in a different location, which I've done several times. So there's extra time required, especially if you're dealing with retirement accounts, because in that case the documents actually have to go to the custodian company. They have to notarize the document, not the private money lender. And this, overnight documentation can take time. So the mortgage is the most important document that has to be notarized by both parties, whether it's the custodian and you, or the private money lender themselves and you. All right. So, and this happened to me once, is that I told the title company where my private money lender, they're in a different state. I'm in a different state. And of course, the title company was somewhere else. And I asked them what date needs to be on it. And they said, oh, it can be the date that they're signing. And then it was really funny, the date has to be prior to closing. And then suddenly they realize something and they say, oh, that cannot happen. It'll be illegal. You cannot sign something that you don't own yet. I said, I know that. That's why I was asking you what should be the date. And so they really had to go back and forth to figure out on their end, on legal terms, to make sure it's correct. So my point is, always talk to your title company about how you're doing, who is involved, and how the transaction has to happen. So situation could be different. Uh, yeah. So yeah, the predate thing. All right. Number nine, buying with the tenant in place. I just bought a property with the tenant in place, and it's an interesting experience. So always ask for the lease agreement. You will often get this answer that, oh, there's no lease agreement. Well, that's even bigger problem, because if there is no lease agreement, you don't know what the terms are. You don't even know what the account status is. So you're really buying a very, very big problem. So you don't want to do that. So there is something called a tenant estoppel certificate, which is basically a status of the account, and it has to be notarized by both the seller and the tenant. And that becomes a legal document if there's no lease. All right. So in my case, I was told that there was no lease and that the tenant was on a month-to-month basis. I have no way of knowing that. So I asked them for that. So initially they send me an estoppel certificate without being notarized. What that means is I don't know who signed it, right? So it has to be a legal document, so it has to be notarized. So then they had it notarized, and that was the basis for me to offer them contract for deed. Because based on that, I figured out how much they were paying, what their terms were, how long they were there, and it was a much easier process to do that. All right. Tip. if the seller claims that the tenant did not pay the current month's rent on the closing date, insist that you get paid either way, regardless of the seller's ability to collect or not. Do you see that? It's really interesting because it's very easy for them to say that, because I'm buying a property with the assumption that the tenant is current and has been paying rent. So if you're not paying me, well, it's not my problem, it's your problem. Otherwise, what that assumes is that, well, you go ahead and collect. Well, I'm not going to collect. So remember, closing is like is a good way for you to ensure that whatever needs to happen happens by then. Otherwise, it won't happen afterwards. Nobody will take your call afterwards, as they say. All right, finally, taking possession. So at closing, you should be receiving keys to the property. If you have boots on the ground, you can ask them to get keys, put them in a lockbox. Obviously, it's a great idea to change the locks because you don't want a former tenant or owner trying to access the property. And if you don't have boots on the ground, I've asked the listing agent, and they're more than happy to help you. I've had listing agents put lock boxes with their own cost. They don't mind helping you out. I've offered to pay for it. So that's basically it. If you guys have any questions, let's answer those. We got about 7 minutes. Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was just saying, I had read a few comments lately in the group, and some of the issues people had closing and the tenants weren't out yet. So I would also include a final walkthrough inspection prior to closing or closing that day. If a tenant's supposed to be on, they need to be on before you actually close.
Absolutely, because otherwise it becomes your problem.
All
You're
right.
absolutely
The
right. So
same, make sure that all the electrical has not been stolen, things like that too.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Mm.
And because it becomes your problem, so you don't want to do that. Great, thank you. Holly?
Oh, one of the good tips too is the closing companies I've worked with love to throw it into my name and not my LLC's name. So making sure that you're
Oh,
never signing in just your legal name, that you are putting that you are the main member or that you are signing as a member of your LLC.
that's a good point. Absolutely. And so this all comes clear when you know who the escrow officer is, because they're a little bit more knowledgeable about this, because they know what documents are required legally, and they will clarify how you need to sign and what the name on the deed needs to be. I think there was Terry, go ahead.
I was wondering, you said you had mortgages and promissory notes for every state. Where did you get those?
So I used a online service. I forgot the name. I'll look it up. And it's a company that hires attorneys in different states, and you can pay a flat fee, and they give you a template that is legal for that state.
Okay,
It's
that's
not
great.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
honestly, even if you go to an attorney, I've been to attorney's office. Literally, they bring out a template from their drawers that they reuse over and over again. So you do it once, and then you don't need to do it. I am only buying in Illinois and Ohio right now, and I have templates for those. But like I said, like never take my word for it. Just do your own research, make sure everything is legal.
The other thing is, I've been a private money lender, and the title company records it for us, the mortgage and promissory note, and that's Pennsylvania. So I don't know. Yeah, wouldn't they do that for you in this case too?
So like I said, I've actually spoken to a title company when I asked them, the first one that I was closing with, and they flat out refused. They said, we don't do this. That's not a
Okay.
service we do. By the way, you know how most of these title companies work, right? They're either run as a franchisee system, or they work under a attorney or group of attorneys. So for them to create these documents, they actually need an attorney to draw them. And if they don't have anybody on staff, they have to outsource it, source it. And if they can't do it, they just want to do it for you, right? Now, I guess it depends. If you're a old client and if you've been using them for a long time, maybe they'll do it for you. Obviously in our case, unless you're Joey, right, who like closes like crazy with the title company, they probably know him so well, right? But most of us, we are closing 1 or 2 deals, and it's rare that you're gonna go to the same title company over and over again. So, but just check. That's what I'm saying is that yes, ideally you can have them do it, but see, my other problem is in my case, I've worked with self-directed IRAs where the custodian actually sends the money out, which means the timing has to be right. The document has to go to them directly. They're going to notarize it. Then it has to come to, I notarize it, then I send it to them, and then it has to go to the title company. If the title company is creating the documents, you're assuming they're going to do all of these things with FedEx and all these things. And what if they don't do it on time? So I'd like to take control of it and do it myself.
Good point. My Ira missed a closing one time, so I know how that goes because
Yeah.
it was a legal review. But I never have to sign those any documents again. I guess this is a state by state thing too.
Correct. It could be that. That's why whichever state you're in, you need to make sure you know everything about it. So, okay, cool. All right, guys. So we got 3 minutes left. Hope this was exciting. I'm excited to for the hey, Major. We have 2 minutes. You want to tell us about the promo that's happening?
Guys having a 5-day challenge.
Yeah.
It's probably not so much for the students in the program, but newer people looking to get into the program. Show them the benefits of doing SlowFlips, what's involved, things like that. Everything you guys already got here with Amir and through the training already. But it's really to pique interest with people.
Right, right. No, I think it's going to be exciting because Scott's going to be teaching, and he's going to talk about it, and it's always good to watch him talk about these things. I think I have a little bit more time. I put this clock here, but I looked at the original clock is 5 minutes, so I can answer more questions, or if you want to share something. Kevin, can I?
We're gonna have some superstars on there like Amir and some other students that are more experienced, so they'll be there, and anybody can join, I believe.
Yep, cool. Hey, Kevin, I wanted to call on you just to see how you're doing, if you had any questions.
Hey Amir, thanks so much for the call again. It was great training on the closing. I have my first one scheduled for the 18th. Knock on wood, it all goes good. My questions on the flip side, I guess I was more worried about the contract for deed part when I get my buyer in there. As much modules as I watched, I guess I'm kind of missing the or I forget. Is it simply just a table document with the buyers that you can just do between each other, or do you need it legalized, an attorney, and all that stuff?
So, yes, it has to be a legal document for that state. So in some states, there's the term used is installment contract. In
It's
some states,
Ohio. You mentioned Ohio.
yeah.
I'm in Ohio.
And I think Ohio is agreement for deed. I have to check. I don't honestly remember because I actually don't do those. That is something if you're going to hire a team that's going to fill the house for you, that's part of their job. That's what they're charging you for. And they do it so often that not only do they have the right template, the best thing that I like that is very valuable is that they can tweak the numbers a little bit if the numbers are not getting out right. I mean, they'll follow what you want, but they want to make sure that the taxes come out right and the interest doesn't go out too high for whatever the state is. So I would just let them do it, but there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, all right. This is something new. Yeah, so I had the timer here and then suddenly something came up and said, your time's up. I'm like, I don't know. All right, so I'm sorry. Hopefully that answered your question, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And yeah, feel free to work with people. I'm telling you, that's all I've used. I have not filled a single one of my properties. Everybody, I've always hired somebody on the forum, and my experience have been really good. I have not had any problem.